Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Tess and I are really happy to be here. Let's go ahead. We'll go ahead and introduce ourselves. Tess, why don't you jump off?
Great. Thanks, Georgie. I'm Tess Humbry. I'm NARO's Director of Congressional Relations. So I am your eyes and ears on Capitol Hill. I also help organize NARO's grassroots. So when an action alert needs to get sent out, or I need a little bit of help connecting with your members of Congress, you guys are the ones that I turn to, and I help organize those efforts. Georgie, do you want to talk a little bit about your title and what it is you do for NARO?
Absolutely. Thank you, Tess. I'm Georgi again, and exact title, Director of Policy and Program Development. I'm really Tess's counterpart on the administration side. But Tess works on Congress. I work with the administration, really HUD mainly, but in the last few years, it really has spread out to other departments, Homeland Security and Justice Department, and even Treasury from time to time. So we keep take your information, take that back, bring it back here to Washington, D.C., make sure all the headquarters staff know what's going on out in the field, and really sharing your stories with HUD and the other agencies. And then we also bring you information as well, sometimes to supplement and to beef up the information you get from your field offices sometimes as well. What we'd like to do here, just so you can get to know us a little bit more. I recognize a lot of names on the list, but there's some we don't, so you probably don't recognize us all that much either. So we do want to make sure you know who we are. So Tess, kind of tell us just where you got things started and how'd you get to become NARO's Director of Congressional Relations?
Thanks, Georgie. Well, like a lot of you, I kind of fell into housing. I moved to Washington, D.C. in 2009 and needed work. And I had a friend who had worked for a company that I worked for previous to NARO, and they needed a little bit of help with their policy work, and they needed somebody to do housing policy. So I fell into it and found that I really enjoyed it. And when I was working with that organization, I was walking into a building one day for a coalition meeting with a bunch of other housing organizations, and I got in the elevator with John Boehm, who was my predecessor here at NARO. He's the former congressional director of congressional relations. I got into an elevator with him and started making some small talk with him, and he'd mentioned that he was looking for a little bit of help because he just lost a staff person, and it was appropriation season, and it was right before the Washington conference, which, if you know anything about our work, is like pretty much the busiest time of year. And he realized quickly that I worked for a consulting firm. And so the two of us got to talking, and a couple of months later, I came on as part-time NARO staff. So it really just happenstance and chance encounters that really have paved my way here. But I couldn't have asked for a better small talk in an elevator now that I get to address you guys. How about you, Georgie? How did you get into housing and connect with NARO?
Yeah, kind of a little bit the same. I'm a lawyer by trade. Started up in Michigan, went to law school up in Michigan, and then started my own law firm for a little while. And then actually went to the Small Business Administration and really started working on disaster relief. That's where the housing connection kind of really started with me, looking for Small Business Administration loans for Katrina and Rita. So actually, I was based out of Dallas for about a year in the Small Business Administration Disaster Center there. I also spent some time in Louisiana on the coast as well. When I came back, again, that was temporary positions. So I came back, went to Washington, D.C., and started consulting on the housing side of things. The voucher work was where I really started. And I got my first taste of NARO really from the training side. I became a NARO trainer probably almost 10 years ago now. And that's where I started. I've been to a few year agencies with just as a NARO trainer in the late 2000s, about 2010 timeframe. So that was really exciting to see how the public housing programs, see your agencies, and really get close to agencies, and to supplement what I already did as a commissioner back in Michigan for a housing authority as well, a small housing authority with 97 public housing units, about 100 vouchers. So the training portion of my NARO career kind of blossomed and went into the director of policy position when that opened up, and I transitioned over there. That's where I met Tess and really our professional relationship really kicked off there, and we worked really well together and making sure, again, your voice is heard throughout Washington and not just Congress, but also HUD and Congress together. So that's kind of a little background on us, gets a sense of just where we come from, and that we now, I think I've been doing this for between my mother's administration work almost 15 years now in the housing, affordable housing. How long have you been doing this, Tess?
Like 12 years about. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we're becoming we're getting some seasoning on us. Let's put it that way. So let's go ahead and jump in. I know COVID-19 has been our worlds for the past 7, I think almost 8 months now. As you can see, both Tess and I are not in our offices. I think we're both. I'm at my home. I think Tess, you're out on the West Coast right now. So, but we're more than happy to join you. We've joined lots of other conferences, other state and regional NAROs as well, to share some information. But let's go ahead and there's been a little bit of news on the congressional front. So Tess, why don't you jump in there, and then we can come back and talk about some of the HUD pieces.
Thanks, Georgi. It's been quite the week. I think a lot of you are aware that there's been a lot of chaos in Washington, D.C. Let's step back a little bit and talk about where we've been, and then we can talk a bit about where we are right now and where we may or may not go. So if you'll remember, CARES passed back on March 27th. And since then, in Washington, the conversation has really been about what is going to come next after CARES. Because I think it was the expectation of a lot of people after that passed that wasn't the final bill, that more resources would be needed for HUD programs, for food stamps, for all sorts of different things. And especially since the economy is now officially in a recession, there's just a lot of need out there that wasn't fully addressed by the CARES Act. Since March 27th, that really has tied up everything in Washington. Everything we do links back to, will there be more COVID relief? What will that look like? And when is that going to happen? So everything from appropriations to any sort of normal legislation, all of it's basically just been on hold waiting for something. So back in March, after that passed, the House got to work pretty quickly putting together what has now known as the HEROES Act. It was approximately $3.4 trillion. It passed off the House floor in mid-May, and it included about $12 billion additional dollars for HUD programs that you guys administer. So pretty big package, and it came with a lot more resources for you guys. So we were pretty happy to see that. That passed back on May 15th, and since then, they've been pushing various proposals of that. They've been pushing pieces of that, trying to get something through that would be acceptable to Senate Republicans. Since that passed in mid-May, the Senate made it pretty clear up until mid-July that they wanted to wait to see what the impact of the CARES Act would be. It was a pretty big bill, and that was a lot of money to put out on the street. And they wanted to see, as the economy started to reopen a bit, as states started to move past their full lockdown, what was the economic impact going to be of that plus the CARES Act. So they didn't want to move forward with a gigantic bill again so quickly after passing CARES. So they, after that passed in May, they kept pushing off the conversation. They didn't want to negotiate yet. They wanted to see what was going to happen. After the 4th of July recess in July, they put forward what's referred to as the HEALS Act. So that was their version of HEROES. It was approximately $1 trillion. So there's a pretty big difference there between HEROES and HEALS. It was proposed in late July. There was about $3 billion in HUD funding for programs that you guys administer, which we were pretty happy to see, because up until the introduction of HEALS, I was hearing that it was very possible that there would be no HUD funding in that bill. So you guys did a really great job of communicating with your senators that there was more resources that needed to be included for you guys. That proposal never was brought to the Senate floor. There's been a pretty wide disagreement within the Senate Republican caucus over the right size of this package. So HEALS was $1 trillion, but a lot of Republican senators wanted to see that scaled down quite a bit. And without a majority of Republican senators on board, it's just not something that can pass the Senate. So knowing that throughout the August recess, they worked as a coalition and brought HEALS down to about $500 billion, a skinny HEALS as they were referring it to. Unfortunately, that cut out all the HUD funding, so we were not happy to see that. That did pass the Senate floor in mid-September. So in mid-September, we were looking at two different pieces of legislation. One is the HEROES Act that was $3.4 trillion, and then the other is HEALS that got pulled down to $500 billion. So it's a pretty huge gulf in between. Meanwhile, while all of this stuff was happening on Capitol Hill, the White House was engaged in negotiations with Nancy Pelosi up at the Capitol. And so Steve Mnuchin and the Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, they were trying to figure out, is there some sort of right size between what the Senate Republicans are doing over here and what Nancy Pelosi is doing over here with the HEROES Act. Those negotiations broke down in early August. And that's when we saw the introduction, for lack of a better word, of the executive orders that allowed the CDC eviction moratorium, that small increase to the unemployment insurance that had expired at the end of July. That was the administration acknowledging that Capitol Hill's at a standstill and they wanted to move forward with some of these things without them. So those negotiations broke down for all of August and only resumed between the House and the White House about two or 3 weeks, 2 weeks ago, I guess. So last week, the House again put forward another version of HEROES, a smaller, skinny, I don't know if anybody's calling it skinny HEROES, but smaller HEROES. This is $2.2 trillion. And luckily, all of the HUD funding that was included in that original HEROES Act is still included in the smaller version of HEROES that was passed last week. So we came from 3.4 trillion down to 2.2 trillion in the House, which is, it's something. But even with the smaller HEROES, that number just wasn't something that the Senate Republicans could accept, and it isn't something that the White House could accept. So we're basically stuck in this spot, which is really frustrating for a lot of us who've been working on this for the last 6 months. We've been working really hard to try to get more resources for you guys, and between the House, Senate, and White House, they're still roughly $1 trillion apart. And one of the major negotiating pieces that they haven't really been able to agree upon is what amount of money goes to the state and local governments that are hit pretty hard by their tax bases right now. And even though the negotiations between the White House and Nancy Pelosi have seemed really productive and really good, those are the two pieces, the overall spending level and the state and local government funding really is just something that they were never able to bridge that gap. So yesterday afternoon, unfortunately, right before the markets closed, the president tweeted that he was pulling his people out of the negotiations, and he, from his perspective, thought that the House was unwilling to budge and there was no point in continuing. So he tweeted that at I don't know, 3 or 4 in the afternoon on the East Coast. And then last night was tweeting support for standalone packages for individual stimulus for Americans and a few other of the pieces that have been part of the negotiations. So while he shut the negotiations down, it seems like there's still some conversation happening in Washington over maybe pulling apart this legislation or pulling apart the conversations and passing them as standalone, which hasn't really been on the table for a while because the House leadership rejected that over the summer. But maybe now that he's pulled his people back again, maybe that there's room for conversation there. But pretty much this morning, everybody in Washington doesn't quite know where we're going to go with COVID-19 negotiations, but everybody seems to agree that the tweet last night probably means that there's not going to be anything passed until at least after the election. Depending on how the election goes, we may not see a COVID-19 relief bill passed in the lame duck session either, which is that kind of awkward time when members of Congress come back to DC, even if they got booted from office, and finish up the work of that Congress session. So at this point, it's frustrating, but we're not much farther than we were 6 months ago after CARES passed. But one thing that has made a difference and has pushed these negotiations along is the pressure that you guys have put on your members of Congress to get something done. I think the negotiations probably would have collapsed a lot longer ago if members of Congress weren't facing that kind of pressure as they're running for re-election from you guys. So I highly encourage you to continue to send letters from our Action Center on our website. It's available even if you don't remember your NARO login, or if you want to send it to family members or friends who are housing advocates. There's a pre-drafted letter with our requests for Congress, and I just keep sending that to your members and let them know that you haven't forgotten that there's some pretty dire need on the ground, especially with the HUD programs that you guys administer. So that's the chaos on Capitol Hill. Georgi, do you want to talk about some of the things that's happening a few blocks west of the Capitol at HUD?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, thanks for that update. Again, there has been some activity again over the last few months, so HUD does have some pieces. I'm going to start with these. I keep adding to my list of things I want to touch on, COVID and non-COVID related. Let me start with, make sure to go to our NARO website, naro.org/coronavirus, for the latest information from HUD and other agencies as well, and also the naroblog.org and naroblog.org for hot topic information as well. Before I jump into the COVID-19 stuff, let me touch on a couple of dates and a couple of things that are non-COVID related. I think just so we make sure we round it out, because there is other activity going on. It's a busy time of year for just regular activity from HUD. One of the pieces we've been waiting for, and I want to congratulate a number of housing authorities in Texas, is the MTW program, Moving to Work. The expansion is moving forward. You have 4 agencies in your state that are been asked to submit applications. Travis County under cohort 1, Arlington, Dallas, and Houston under cohort 2 to test new methods in the Moving to Work program. So congratulations on that, and best of luck to all your agencies on the MTW program. In the last couple of weeks, a number of new notices and rules have come out. And even just today, a very large proposed rule just came out this morning as well. But Section 3, the economic using of your funds for low and very low income individuals and contracts, has come out in a final rule over the last couple of weeks. That will take effect going forward. We have more information on the website. Again, that is moving forward, and we will see a switch from what they talked about as new hires, measuring new hires with using your funding, to looking at hours people are working. So you're hiring people based on their income, how many hours are they working? So there's a process to look at that. Smaller agencies have some flexibility on just being narrative and not having to meet actual number goals, like larger agencies will try to meet there as well. The Family Self-Sufficiency Program has a proposed rule that just came out that is implementing from the Economic Growth Act from a couple of years ago. That is finally getting into the rule stage. It is a proposed rule. We'll be commenting going forward. Again, more information on our website and our emails on that. The newest piece that just came out, there's 2 pieces that came out this morning. The mobility demonstration, if there's about $50 million available for the mobility demonstration. HUD has extended the deadline. It was going to be it is relatively soon. It has been, though, extended through till December 14th. So any agencies are working with their local communities to try to get mobility vouchers and mobility service money. That has extended till December 14th. And the big one that came out this morning is on HOTMA, the Housing Opportunity Through Modernization Act. We were expecting a final rule to come out on some income pieces, and we still expect that to come out eventually over the next couple of weeks. This was not it this morning. It is a conforming rule and some streamlining rules on the voucher program, HQS, project-based vouchers, and the voucher program in general, some general streamlining. It is a proposed rule. Comments are open for 60 days, so they'll be due towards the end of or the early part of December at this point. So we'll again be reviewing that. It is brand new House of Presses. It's 250 pages of updated rules. So we'll take a look at that, touching home ownership, when you can do HQS inspections, what kind of, it does tweak inspections slightly as well. We'll have more information on that in the next few days and in coming weeks as well. All right, coming back to COVID in the last few minutes here. And again, feel free to send questions into the chat box, and we can address those in the last couple of minutes of today's session. I do want to touch on the inspection protocol side of things. HUD has ramped up and restarted their inspections as of Monday. Inspections with REAC are started again. This started back in August. They set out some information saying agencies in the green, and that's a measurement of how many COVID cases you have per 100,000 people. If you're below 1, you go in the green. If you've been green for 45 days, then plus your 14-day notice. Some agencies and multifamily programs, that deadline, that time ran on October 5th through that entire process. No housing authorities, it looks like, have been inspected at this time, but that could always change going forward if there are troubled agencies and agencies that have not passed recently their inspections. In Texas itself, there are only 4 counties that qualify right now for to be on the inspection lists because they're green for the last 6 weeks. It's Briscoe County, Kimball County, King County, and Loving County. So those 4 counties have been green for the past 6 weeks, in less than 1 new COVID case per 100,000 people on a rolling average over 7 days. It is potential that you could receive, if you're a high priority agency for an inspection, you could receive a 14-day notice for that inspection. You would need to remain green for that time of that inspection. HUD has just released the protocols on that. The inspector will be calling to set up the inspection 2 days before the inspection and even the morning of the inspection to make sure that everything is still good and there's no COVID cases in your property as well. So that's moving forward. HUD has issued a new frequently asked questions. It's their 6th version. It is on their website. It's on our website, and it is grown. It's about 70 pages now. It started out as only a couple pages, the first version. It has grown with everything that has gone on, going through the CARES Act funding for public housing, for vouchers, for HAP, for admin fee. All that has added to it. They actually pulled out a section from the from version 6 on the eviction moratorium, because the CARES Act eviction moratorium has expired, but they also then acknowledge the CDC eviction halt order, but don't provide guidance on it, any additional guidance at this time. They had a call on it. Again, make sure you're providing, or you have the option as an agency to provide your tenants, provide your landlords the information to the CDC order. Remember, it only applies if the tenant does an activity, and that is provide the landlord a signed declaration under the penalties of perjury. As a PHA, if you receive that, as a landlord, if you receive that, there's not a lot you can do to contest that right now. If you're wrong and you're contesting it, then you have possible criminal penalties against the agency of up to $200,000 in certain situations, and even $500,000 if a death results from the eviction. So if you have that order, those are good. Those declarations are good through the end of this year, December 31st, 2020. We'll see what happens. It is potential that could be extended. It may not be extended. We do not know at this time, and we'll see where we go from there. The deadlines for the CARES Act funding have been extended over the past few weeks. So your public housing funds that you receive, part of that $685 million. If you've received those funds now can be used through the end of next year, December 31st, 2021, as extension from the end of 2020. So 2021 for public housing funds. Voucher funds, the admin fee funds you received in two groups. Both groups of those funds have been extended as also to December 31st, 2021. Again, you have till 2021, the end of 2021, to use your admin fees. HAP money, if you have applied for HAP money from the CARES Act, there's 2 groups there. Increased PUC, per unit cost agencies. Those agencies who receive money under that classification will have until December 31st, 2021 to use those funds. However, the second category, shortfall agencies, if you receive your funding through shortfall, the shortfall process, you only have until December 31st, 2020 to use your funds. There has been discussion of potentially extending that, but it becomes very complicated because the way they actually merge 2 pots of money to do shortfall funding. We have not heard of any extension. That is still December 31st, 2020 for shortfall funding expenditures. Remember on the eligible uses, to use your funds use those funds in replacement of your normal day-to-day operating funds, admin fee funds. You can use both the operating funds and the admin fee funds for normal activities. So normal operating fund activities can be use the CARES Act operating funds. You can also use the operating fund for capital projects. Capital projects are also eligible through December 31st, 2021. Both your normal operating funds and your CARES Act operating funds can be used for capital activities through the end of next year as well. Again, for the voucher program admin fee, normal admin fee activities, you can use your funds for normal admin fee activities. The reporting process for those has begun. The discussion of that, you'll be reporting under annual reporting through the FDS, the Financial Data Schedule, using special COVID-19 coronavirus columns, the 14-point columns in the new FDS. So you'll be keeping your money separate. CARES Act funding and normal annual money, keep them separate. If you receive more than $150,000 in CARES Act funding from any source of CARES Act funding, you will also have to do quarterly reporting on a quarterly basis. The next quarterly report is actually due October 10th, but that is on hold right now because HUD has not issued created the portal or updated the portal that's going to be used to make those quarterly reportings. But remember, this is actually October is actually the second report that is due. The first one was actually due on July 10th. That was also passed because the portal wasn't available. It looks like October 10th will pass because the portal is not available. The next report will be due January 10th. Make sure, though, based on the notices, that you keep the information for all the full time, because you will probably have to report backwards as well. HUD will try to provide most of the information they can from their information, but you will have to provide some activity-based, what the money was spent on information there. So, reminder again, naro.org/coronavirus for all the coronavirus information, naroblog.org for all the various types of housing information. Those are the two best places to get information. On the advocacy side, naro.org/advocacy. Make sure to send those letters to Congress and to the administration, making sure that they're keeping their eye on the ball for both coronavirus funding and also annual appropriations for fiscal year 2021, which we've only got into a continuing resolution and don't have final funding yet. But with that, Michael, I'll turn things back over to you. Any questions for us?
All right, let's look real quick. Sorry.